Well, even though it's first thing in the morning, this is an exciting topic. So let's launch in. Conscious pain protocol. If we're going to be aware of epic amounts of pain, culturally and personally, then the real key is the map of response. In other words, if we have a good map of responding to pain, then the pain is our ally, because pain is like a smoke detector. It's communicating that there's something out of whack. Nobody enjoys the beeping of a smoke detector, but they enjoy their house burning down even less. And so given the two irritants, getting a message, pain is here, have a look at what's going on, is superior to numbing, shutting, putting the smoke detector under a few pillows, joy of joy. You don't have to listen to it, but you do have to repair the house. And so the first step in a conscious pain response protocol is to diagnose the imbalance. And this is system theory. So within, there's an intersection with reality between the full dimensionality and symmetry of all that is and the perceived structure of reality through the lens of the human ego. And unfortunately, the infinite lines that create the sphere, because there's this nexus when beyond that, this dualistic energy of masculine and feminine, black and white, of up and down, becomes a unipolar energy, a synergy. But we're in the region looking through measuring devices that breaks things down into distinctions. And so we break consciousness down into language. That's the position within the ego, which is a masculine. It's a masculine position. The ego, to a certain extent, by its very nature, is masculine in that it is the part that sees the separation. So it is the part that breaks the whole down into bits, and it is the part that notices something by boundary. Because how does the ego register the color red? Well, it's separate from blue, and it's separate from yellow, and it's separate from green, and so it's red. Now, it doesn't matter particularly what label is given to red. In Japan, they may call red hukuri. In Brazil, they may call it mamba. It doesn't matter. Red, hukuri, mamba. The key thing is these sounds are separate from the other sounds, green and blue, pinturi, sokali. They're different sounds, and they're just sounds that somebody made up, and everyone agreed we're going to use that label whenever we see this. We're going to call this white. And we get, of course, very irritated if someone says, no, this is gold. And we say, no, it isn't, it's white. It's white. Not only that, but spell it properly. Why? Because we're trying to stay sane. It's no good if you call this gold and I call it white and so calls it blue. And because then when we say, bring me the white chalk, everyone brings a different color of chalk, and so it's chaos. And so it's like you can't create flow out of chaos. You need a certain amount of order. And so we break the infinite sphere down into compartments or distinctions that the conscious ego is capable of digesting, which is not a very sophisticated level of distinction. Certainly within recent access memory. This we take this sphere, an infinite number of lines in all dimensions, meaning just a circle is an infinite number of lines, and then a sphere is an infinite number of lines of infinite number of lines, because you've got infinite circles within the sphere, depending on the angles. You've got 3 axes, each with an infinite number of lines. So you've got infinity times 3 when you have a sphere. But we break it down into little boxes that we can process through the human ego. And so that we've broken this system down into 5. Now, this is not a terribly bad system, because it's better than saying good and bad. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if rather than saying good and bad, we said unbalanced off to the left, very unbalanced off to the left, somewhat balanced, equal, balanced off to the right, somewhat, very imbalanced, and then equal and coming together. Wouldn't that be nice if we actually broke duality down into a 5-fold system, where, we exited the place of balance and returned to the place of balance, depending on whether we were looking at the vertical or the horizontal axis. That would be so lovely. Reality wouldn't be so black and white. But we often do just settle for a binary system. That's good, that's bad. Go, you're a bad person, you're a good person. It's very, very, very difficult to integrate reality when you lack distinction. Because what you want to say, and this was my challenge to the women who would tell me that they trusted me completely. You're in trouble when someone says they trust you completely, because it means they don't understand what trust is. Trust is an accurate reading or an inaccurate reading of who the other person is in a given moment, in a given context. If you trust me to hold up the Golden Gate Bridge in an earthquake, you have been sorely mistaken about the limits of my human body, not to mention the fact that I'm not on location. But if you trust me to tell the truth as the best of my ability in the language that I know, in the paradigms in which I operate, well, that's pretty good basis of trust, since I've never lied to a friend, a partner. That's a pretty good basis of trust. So, you have, you make trust completely irrelevant if you think someone is completely trustworthy or completely untrustworthy without defining it. You make values completely irrelevant if you think someone is completely terrible or completely wonderful without any assessment. It's one positive and intelligent aspect of our Central Intelligence Agency is they work a lot with criminals. They pay criminals, because, just like Patton when he went into Germany, he understood that given the job to keep the German the German peasantry alive, the various cottages and people scattered around the country in a broken infrastructure, he would need help, and so he hired the SS, who had strategic competence. Only now, rather than rounding up Jews, the strategic competence was used to bring firewood to the German citizenry or clean the roads and stuff. And so, Patton was practical in that sense, but it was politically impractical, meaning the idea of partnering with the bad villain is politically unpalatable in a simple mind. And so this had to be done under wraps. The point is, you have a system here. Now, this system is way more elegant than a binary system, but it has friction points at these corners. every corner is a friction point in energy. Why? Because energy is flowing through a system. So within the sphere, you have circular flows. The flows are spiral and circular. You don't have, water making a right angle, because it takes discipline and energy expenditure to make something turn a corner. If a human being is walking and you have a right angle path, it takes discipline and energy to turn a sharp corner, which is why if you're designing for the human body and energy conservation, you design curved pathways in the radius at which the step is comfortable to make the curve. That's what a good designer will do. So if this were a million distinction system, you'd have a million little lines, and you'd hardly see them with the human eye, and it would feel very graceful. This is something that the human brain can comprehend. And remember, you can say, what are the 5 points of the system? It's like, oh gosh, there's the conjunctive adjective, there's the this. I can remember 5 things if they're not too complicated and used regularly. So we create a 5-part system, not because reality is so simple, but because it helps us remember and thus interact with reality. It's no good having a system that is so complex that we're unconscious of it, which is really the dilemma we're in. We are in an ecological system of energy, of feeling, of thought, of sensation, of synergy, and of other dimensions we don't have words for, that are so complex that we are unconscious of them within the framework of our human ego. And what we're really looking at is models of interacting with very complex and graceful systems that are not so terrible that we do not have an extraordinary amount of unnecessary suffering, which is, of course, the dilemma we find ourselves in. Our models are so terrible that we have an extraordinary amount of unnecessary suffering. So the first thing to do is we're going to use a human model to diagnose the pain. And the pain is going to come in an asymmetry, in a dis-ease, in an elongation of the sphere. That's what's going to cause pain, because we're part of a system that's moving towards integration, towards wholeness, towards synergy, towards abundance, towards greater and greater distinction in consciousness. We're part of that system, but we're relating to it with very crude models. And so the model that we create is going to lead to an artificial imbalance where we're fighting the actual flow of reality in order to hold on to certainty in the context of a model that isn't actually real, but that works better than the chaos of no model and the paralysis that chaos induces. So we start breaking things down into bits. That's the nature of language. As soon as you have a language for hand, now hand seems like a bit. It's not. It's part of an integrated body system, which is part of an integrated species system, which is part of an integrated planetary system, which is part of an integrated solar system. I mean, it's not separate. It's just that the word hand tends to suggest that it is. So we diagnose the imbalance. And so, for example, let's take our system of heart, mind, and body. So this is a pretty crude system, but it's better than nothing. So we say, okay, well, we've got feelings, we've got body sensations, we've got thoughts. So we say, okay, well, where's the pain? Is it a thought that is so painful? Is it just this ache that I don't I don't know what I'm thinking about it. I just got this horrible ache in my heart, or my toe just keeps throbbing, And so it's a useful distinction to be able to decide, am I going to go to a physical hospital since we've broken out the medicine? Am I going to go to a psychiatrist? Am I going to get drunk? Am I going to go to a physical hospital? It's a useful distinction over just I have pain, and you start off at the hospital and they say, no, it's not in your body, we can't see anything, and you go to the psychiatrist and they say, well, what are you thinking? And you say, oh, I don't know, and they send you off to a healer or something, and they say, here it is, and you've gone 3 trips, So it's a useful distinction for the response. But you diagnose the imbalance. So you say, okay, it is a emotional pain. And then you say, okay, what kind of emotional pain? Is it guilt? Is it shame? Is it despair? Is it loneliness? Is it exhaustion? What kind of pain is it? Is it constant anxiety and longing for peace? What kind of pain is it? You diagnose that. And then, of course, there's always a correlation between the inner world and the outer world. It may be a delayed correlation, meaning if you're frozen in trauma and your biology is therefore frozen in the past, you may be in extraordinary pain around an event that happened at 5 years old that never got released from the body system. So the body system is frozen in a shape at the point at which one dissociated. And so the pain could simply be going back into that event and working with it in a way that unfreezes the chemistry at that time, and that axis of the body is no longer storing that shape, registering that a new shift has occurred, and you come back in the present, and there never was any pain in the present. The pain in the present was, why do I have to keep holding that 5-year-old pain in my biology, year after year? With everyone asking me to move on and pretending that it's not there. So you diagnose the imbalance, its location, and then you diagnose the design flaw that's creating the imbalance. So I have pain because at 5 years old, every single person that I wanted to bring this energy to looked at me with hate and impatience. And I really needed to bring this energy because I'm at 5 years old, I can't contain as much of the system. So I've been given a piece of it and I've got to let it move forward. I can't contain it. And when you're younger and older, it's much harder to maintain this delusion that we're completely separate in the systems in which we operate. It's much harder to maintain the delusion that that's you and this is me. A 5-year-old, a 90-year-old, etc., is more likely to understand and feel that they're a part of something and to need to express that, in a way that transcends the delusion of separation, looking through one eye and then looking at the same thing through another eye and then another eye, all these little egos looking at the same pattern of energy and pretending that they have nothing to do with it. So you diagnose the design flaw and the paradigm flaw. For example, rationalist, reductionist, materialist science is a paradigm flaw if it's seen as the totality. If it's seen as a piece, one of many pieces, it's a great instrument. But it's human nature, in the fear of chaos, in the fear of the unknown, in the fear of the uncertainty that both represent. It's human nature to, once you find some little piece that works really well, to try and turn the rest of reality into something that can be explained with that piece, because in that piece you have confidence, in that piece you have certainty, in that piece of thought you have mastery, and you have respect. And so, scientists having decided that they're better than the Catholics at predicting an apple falling or understanding the rotation of the Earth around the sun and things like that, they get a little bit grandiose in determining that nothing else exists as an act of faith. They have faith that God doesn't exist, that Goddess doesn't exist, that the trillions upon trillions of energetic distinctions that transcend their paradigms don't exist either. They have faith that there is nothing there, that there is no purpose and no reason. It's an act of sheer lunacy, any more than the Catholics' lunacy that there's an old man up there who appreciates you wearing burlap sacks and doing penance for all this thing, and there's a great deal of faith in any paradigm, and it's useful to know that anything that the human mind can conceive is wrong, because the human mind cannot perceive reality in the full complexity, the full grace, the full dimensionality of the distinctions that are present, and even more importantly, to understand that looking at the multiverse through the lens of distinction is one form of consciousness, and looking through the lens of resonance is another form of consciousness, and we can only do the one, which means that by definition, just by looking through the lens of the human ego, we're only seeing half of that picture. We're not seeing the reality in which we are a small part of a multi-layered complex organism. We're seeing the reality in which we are separate from the organism and we're the most important thing. Well, that's one perspective. It's this perspective of the human ego. But it's one perspective amongst billions of perspectives. And so by definition, reality in set theory is always bigger than your set. So if you can, so you can't fully understand your context and place in the world until you're outside of it. Well, we're not outside of it. We're in our little world. So if we understand that anything the human mind can conceive is inadequate, is imperfect by the very nature of its existence, we can then assume that if we're in pain because of this chronic thing keeps going on, it doesn't seem like it needs to, but it just keeps going on, we can assume that at the heart is a design flaw, usually a cult design flaw, because that's what cultures are, is they form little pockets of conglomeration of majorities of ignorant people, and they say, we're all going to agree this. And then they hold to it, often in the face of the evidence, and often very self-referentially. It's like, we believe this, so it must be true. It must be true because we believe it. And look, so-and-so believes it over there, and they're right because they agree with me, and I'm right because I agree with them. It's a wonderful, you can just build up a whole model that way, where the majority that in the history of humankind has always been wrong is right because it is the majority, not using any external referential material. And so, well, there you have it. So you diagnose the design flaw in the paradigm. So, for example, when we're looking at the meaninglessness, at the suicide, at the hedonism, at the hedonic adaptation process of hedonism, where as Kinsey found in his sex research, it took more and more pain, more and more stimulation, more and more partners and variety just to get him to get aroused, because suddenly a rape fantasy wasn't adequate. It had to be 3 people raping him and poking him with nails, and just to get some arousal. Well, obviously, if it takes more and more energy to achieve less and less result, you're getting into an extreme area of a faulty paradigm. In the West, when it takes more and more money to have a less and less satisfying life, where the first $10,000 really satisfied you, and then the next $20,000, we're going somewhere, but it's not quite as exciting as the first 10. And then by the time we're up at 80,000 or more per year, that when you go from 80,000 to 180,000, it doesn't do as much as the first 10. When you bought your first beater car, it was really exciting. Then you bought a better used car, then a new car, then you've bought the top of the line supercar doesn't do at $2.8 million what the one, the little beater you bought when you were 16 and were fixing up, that brought you more meaning and hope, etc. You're going on a path of diminishing returns, which means you're in a binary paradigm that's saying more is better, more is better, more is better, when all the evidence is telling you the exact opposite. So you're in a faulty paradigm. This is the trouble with the materialistic paradigm, is if materialism is good, then it must mean more materialism is more good. And more good is good because it's more good. And so you just keep stacking it on. You have an amazing sexual experience, so more partners must be better, and then more, and then let's have this variety and that variety in red light and blue light, and group events and this, and and it doesn't do as much as the first present experience. Hedonic adaptation takes the continual pursuit of any extreme within the sensory domain and reduces its impact to the ultimate extreme, where it takes all the energy in the universe to create absolutely no value whatsoever, because it's just too much of a good thing, or it turns the other way. The first bite of chocolate cake, absolutely exquisite. The third bite, I feel so nourished. The 108th bite of chocolate cake is disgusting, and I want to vomit. And so it flips the other way. So we're looking at design flaws in the paradigm. And the response is treatment. And you can do two forms of treatment. You can treat within the paradigm. So let's say you've got a 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You've got 5 distinctions in your paradigm. You're in pain, and you don't know how to design a new paradigm. And so you just say, well, it seems like a lot of my energy is over here. I'm spending all my time at work. This is part of our paradigm, right? We have a work paradigm that's different from a home paradigm. Well, of course, this is complete nonsense. Who you are at work arrives home. Who you are at home arrives at work. The job that you do determines the kind of family you have at home. But we still break the distinction down. So let's say you're spending all this time at work and no time at home. Too much work, not enough home. Well, naturally, this is going to create pain. It obviously depends on lots of different substructures, because if you're being nagged at and cheated on and whined at and given insulting remarks at home, and you're being treated as this wonderful moneymaker at work in a paradigm where money is the big thing, well, then you're going to feel more pleasure at work. But still, eventually, it's going to start falling apart, where you no longer know or like your family, etc., and so the whole thing, that system is going to fall apart. And when it does, if that's a part of you, the part of you that wants to be a loving spouse, the part of you that wants to be connected and have, be able to teach or to be able to touch the innocence of your children and all of that, then there's going to be pain because there's a longing for something and there's no satisfaction. And that's ultimately what pain is: separation from and longing for beauty, truth, goodness, and symmetry. Separation from and longing for beauty, truth, goodness, and symmetry. Symmetry is the synergy of all the distinctions. The sphere is the symmetry. And we're looking, there's obviously a lot of paradox within trying to understand a multidimensional system within dualistic consciousness. And so within the symmetry of grace, you have dark and light. You have activity and inactivity. You have sleep and waking in a circle in which the more sophisticated the system, the more you have the gradual increments in between, for example, sleeping and waking. For example, lucid dreaming is a dramatically more sophisticated level of going between consciousness and unconsciousness than just saying consciousness and unconscious. I'm conscious or I'm unconscious, and that's it. If you introduce lucid dreaming, if you introduce hypnosis, if you introduce meditation, and basically create a color wheel in which there's a gradual transition that marks every point in the continuum between consciousness and unconsciousness and what types, to where consciousness becomes a multi-dimensional object with more than 1,000 distinctions as you multiply the different variables between level of consciousness to level of unconsciousness to level of imagery versus level of language versus level of time sequenced thing versus levels of time morphed things. As you multiply these things into 1,000 or so distinctions, and if you can be conscious of that, you have a vast world of awareness that is just waiting for you to enter this space of this moment at that level of awareness. You have a vast resource of awareness that is waiting for you in this moment for you to enter with the paradigm and the eyes to see that big in this moment. This moment is that big. But this moment can feel completely unconscious and invisible if you lack the observing and measuring devices to hold this moment at that level of complexity. And in some ways, it is the dross mediocrity of collapsing something so big into a cult where you ask someone what were they thinking just then, and they say, oh, nothing. And they don't know what they were thinking. And you don't know what they're thinking. And they're not interested in what you're thinking. And this is okay. When a vast dimensional universe inside the moment is collapsed into something so mediocre, there is pain. There is pain if you understand how big the moment is, and you understand that you're in a cult that is grinding the moment down into a mediocrity moment by moment. at a systemic level and is uncomfortable with the breath of soul, the breath of spirit that would shatter the dull sheen of the cult and bring in color, bring in life. There is an enormous grief in sensing what is just beyond the paradigm of the present moment. Well, suddenly, there is a healing. Suddenly there is a healing because you've just established a relationship, a connection with a part of yourself, with a part of who you are that was lost in the brainwashing of an unconscious cult. And it awakens. And suddenly the world is color. Suddenly the moment has meaning, has a pregnant effervescence to it that is beyond language. I want that. That's where the magic is. That's where the dance is. Between the masculine and feminine, the yin and the yang at that level. Wow, that's where it is, I see. To be able to feel that throughout my whole body. A response to the mediocrity, a response to the crudeness, to the cruelty to taking a knife to the child's experience of this world, to protect the adult's ignorance of this world, to protect the adult sense of certainty, the brutality of burning down the Garden of Eden in order to pave it over with gum-stained sidewalks. Well, we're looking at the diagnosis either within the system. I'm spending all my time at work. I'm having no balance and symmetry in my psyche. It's starting to feel painful, just the beginning edges. But I don't know how to respond because I don't have the technology to turn around my marriage and stuff at home. And it's so painful to go into that house and see the gap between how I want to be relating to these people and how I want them to be relating to me and how they actually are. It's just so painful, and every day it gets a little worse because I withdraw a little more in the absence of the technology of transformation. And so there you get into the diagnosis of the imbalance within the family system. You may look at it and say, look, I'm giving all of the money into this family, and this family is giving none of the money back. Okay, there's an imbalance. I'm spending all the time away from the family, and nobody else is spending time away from the family. There's another imbalance. I'm making sacrifices for this family. They're not making sacrifices for me. There's another imbalance. I'm having all these feelings that I'm not talking about, and they're having all these feelings that they're not talking about. There's another imbalance. They're there, but they're not being expressed. So we've got the verbal terrain that is silent, and we've got the inner terrain that is screaming. There's an imbalance. Okay, so these imbalances can start being the basis to restore the balance, the symmetry of the family system, to bring the family together. So it's, when I notice these feelings coming up with my wife as being a primary breadwinner, I respond. And I say, look, let's envision a future in which we both bring equally what we need to bring into support this family. So that's not just a pipe dream. That means these are different skills that you can develop. I developed these skills when I was 15, these skills when I was 17, these skills when I was 22, these skills when I was 25, these skills at 33. I developed these skill sets to be able to do this. And I want to be in partnership. I want to be in a dance as equals. And so I'd like you to develop these skills and these skills and these skills and move towards that image. And I'd like to be honored for the strengths that I bring in this area until such time. I want to be honored. I want to have that imbalance be acknowledged and seen. And you bring these things into our relationship. And I want to aspire to meet you. I want to bring more of that joy. One of the great gifts that my wife brings is joy, innocence, playfulness, laughter at a 600% margin. So if she's bringing those into the relationship and giving life to the relationship with 600% margin, well, first of all, that's one of our relationship's great assets. So how can I engage and be in a way that nurtures and grows that energy? And how can I learn from her and do some of the things that she does to bring more of that energy into the relationship? And how can she learn from me? And so there's a moving into conscious symmetry. And as long as every week of every month of every year, we are consciously moving in that direction, the pain is lessening, both with attention and also with response and with respect, to keep looking, to keep seeing, to keep seeing. We change. And so there is satisfaction. My wife didn't know how to drive when I met her. There's satisfaction in being driven around by her, enjoying her strength, enjoying her growth, enjoying her growing confidence, but also enjoying the return to symmetry. The artificial imbalance created by the cult on different sides and in different family systems and all that, and the coming into balance, so that it can be a fun choice. Who wants to drive today, as opposed to I don't want to drive, but you need this, so I've got to go there. And so this is the response to that system, so that rather than avoiding a diseased particle in the system, my marriage is shit, so I'll just spend more time at work. My marriage is getting out of imbalance in this area, in this area, in this area, so I'm going to attend to it. Do I have partners that will partner with me to bring this into balance? Or shall we dissolve this because I do not have a partner who's willing to bring and seek balance? They're not interested. If they do any little thing, they make me work so hard to nag and remind them that it's easier for me to do it than it is to, quote, receive. If I have to spend more money funding their, quote, business and spend more time helping them avoid mistakes in their business than the money their business brings in and the time their business saves, it's a very expensive hobby for me. And if every time that's, an awareness of that, they're defensive and angry at the idea that they should have to work, well, it's time for another partner that's interested in symmetry and interested in some balance, as opposed to the endless defense of, I'm going to make you suffer and spend and give more for every little thing that comes back, and I'm going to defend it with the New Age thing of don't measure, and I'm going to defend it in this way, and I'm going to defend it in that way. But the bottom line is, this is not moving into balance. I'm being drained so that you can be small, and that's not good for either one of us. So let's dissolve the system into a system in which, if you behave that way, you will experience the direct consequences of that. The landlord isn't going to appreciate that attitude, and so maybe you'll learn through the teacher of pain. And that's another thing to be aware of, that pain is a teacher, like a smoke detector. So what we're really looking at is response. We're looking at responsiveness. What is a map that helps us respond to pain? And so diagnose the imbalance that's causing the pain and presenting the symptoms. And I'm mostly focusing in a psychological paradigm here, since, most of us in some way can get to a hospital, etc., for a hand fell off or something like that. Diagnose the design flaw in the paradigm, and then look at the treatment. So the treatment is the restoration of balance. And it takes place in two fields. The treatment that you want to develop to heal the imbalance that you've diagnosed has two components. One is the choices we are making to relate to the environment as it is. So, for example, I have an Uncle Joe who every time I see him wants to borrow money that this time for sure he will pay back next week, and he never does. So in this domain of imbalance, where every week I give him another 100, the choice is to not give him 100. Now, given that we're not idiots, if we've been feeding a corrupt uncle, perhaps an addiction, etc., for 2 years now at $100 a week, there's probably a pain weapon that he's holding in check that we don't want to deal with. Maybe it's a tantrum. Maybe it's a 30-minute list of everything. He won't come to Thanksgiving. He races by angrily, giving you the finger on the car. He tells everyone what a shit you are and why he won't take care of your uncle. So he's going to do the whole tantruming thing. And so you don't want to deal with that. And so you are sustaining the imbalance out of fear of pain. And this is part of the pivot of turning pain as an enemy into pain as your friend. With pain as your friend, it's an alert of an imbalance, of a separation from and a longing for, a sense of wholeness, a sense of beauty, a sense of truth and goodness, a sense of symmetry that you don't have. I long for this and I have this. And when pain is growing, the gap between the two is growing. I long for a healthy body and I'm getting fat and fatter every month. Well, the pain is growing as measured in the gap between who I want to be and who I am. I long to be more relaxed. I'm becoming more impatient every month. So at the choice level of changing our relationship with an imbalanced environment, it's the choice to assess, to look at the thing. Okay, so if I stop paying $100 a month to so-and-so, there will be this tantrum, this tantrum, this tantrum, da-da-da. Well, what's my choice around that? I don't want to keep being lied to, nor do I want to be punished. well, I can set up some boundaries and consequences around that as well. One might say that perhaps I have too many friends that do not have the intelligence to distinguish an intelligent person from an unintelligent person. It makes sense. If they're not intelligent, how would they understand who is intelligent and who isn't intelligent? It's the same skill. So there are people that are going to believe Uncle Henry, that I'm a jerk and all that, and he is going to make that case because he's going to try and apply enough pain to me that I will continue to give him $100 a month to feed his Coke addiction, because he's not really interested in what's fair. He's not really interested in how it feels to me. He's interested in the next hit. So that's what he's going to do. Well, if we understand a little data and we understand, first of all, that we're not being kind to Uncle Henry by letting him get away with this endlessly, we've got a variety of different responses. We might actually decide to up the care with Uncle Henry, and rather than just withdraw the 100, look at what's so painful in his life that he's got a Coke addiction or a gambling addiction. Addiction is always pain management. It rapidly loses pleasure and becomes a way of, barely getting through the day. And so addiction is pain management. And so if you've got a pain and Uncle Henry is medicating a pain, you might partner on together. Say, hey, Uncle Henry, I'm not going to give you any more hundreds right now because it hurts me and I don't believe in it. But maybe we're both in pain. Maybe we could spend some time together. And I'd be happy to cook you a meal if you want to come over and basically provide a more nourishing substitute to the addiction that actually remedies the underlying imbalance, which could be that he feels completely unlovable and miserable about that, because we all need love and belonging. And so he's, doing various addictions to escape the fact that he cannot believe, having experienced his childhood, that anyone can really be there for him. So he's given up and it's horrible. And so if you invite him to dinner every night and go get him so that he can experience that, well, it's hard to say. But the point is, this is the arena of choice where we're changing our relationship with an existing painful environment. I believe relationships should have ending agreements. If either one of us decide to end this relationship at any point, this is what we will do. And I believe that ending agreement should leave both people stronger than when they came in. And that's also a good point to end the relationship. If people are becoming weaker, meaning less symmetrical, less resilient, less growth-filled, less self-esteem, less survival, security, love, and belonging, self-esteem. If people are becoming weaker within the relationship, it is a cruel relationship of perhaps addiction and dependency, perhaps falling into unconsciousness, but it is not bringing out the best. It is not what a good friend would do to a good friend. A good friend would do to a good friend, helping the other person get stronger than they were before. And this is also a boundary that I have with my wife, that I want to see both of us every month stronger, more resilient, with more life skill, with more resource than the month before. And that this is done in such a way that it creates abundance and also freedom, such that we could leave the relationship if that cycle turns around and both be stronger than when we came in. And this is something I developed after noticing the cruelty of my father's golden handcuffs with my mother, because my mother didn't want to grow up. And so she didn't. And as much as my father resented the lack of partnership, he was more afraid, I think, of the tantrum of a child and an adolescent woman who, with her looks in our cult, might very well just go and find another sugar daddy. And so he enabled her childlike self-centeredness to a point that when, of course, every woman gets old and loses their looks, and he, with his affairs and all of that, she finally built up enough hatred that she wanted to leave him. But she was too scared. And so it was, this very unpleasant thing where he'd given her the sugar that she demanded. And then she was like, I saw her crying, trying to get a sales job and stuff. And it's like, she's dealing with responsibility, the ability and willingness to respond, which she never wanted to deal with, whether it was with the children or with a marriage or with, leaving and taking care of herself. And so I never want to do that to someone. And so regardless of my financial situation, it's important to me that my partner is growing in independence so that the choice to be with me is always one of preference, not one of desperation, not one of need. And it leads to much healthier relationships that end when they should end, if they need to end, which for me is the point where they're not growing and where that is okay that they are stagnating, because it's kind of reached a plateau, and that's usually been in my partner, where they're fine with the fact that things are just comfortable and we're not learning anything new about each other or doing anything. It's like, man, I'm not being hit, I'm not being raped, I'm fine. It's like, well, what drew me in was all the growing, all the learning, all the communicating. And, and so that's part of the choice around how do we relate to something as it is. And if we are really masterful in this terrain, we can be in pretty much any environment and have the upside of the probability field, meaning any environment has a probability field. If you take a slum in South Africa or a slum in Detroit, there's going to be X amount of flu, there's going to be X amount of AIDS, there's going to be X amount of crime per 100 people, there's going to be X amount of poverty, there's going to be X amount of rape. There's going to be a probability field where, 10% of this slum will get raped this year. 20% is going to encounter hepatitis A. There will be 60 violent crimes within this group of 100 people. And that's the statistic. That's the probability field given that environment's design, which is obviously poorly designed. And if you're in that environment and you do this well, you will be in the top 2%, meaning you'll be raped less than 98% of the people there. You'll be get less than 98% of the diseases. So you can be in the high point in the probability field by choosing how you relate with what is, whatever it is. So you can position yourself on the high probability field, but you do not change the system this way. The system is still going to rape 10% of the people that year. It's just not going to be you, most likely. But you're going to have to watch it. And you're going to have to understand that within system theory, this, you're going to be around 10% rape as long as you're in this system. As long as you're in the United States system, you're going to be around 1 in 3 domestic relationships have domestic abuse. You're going to be around 30% it depends how you define it. Somewhere between 10 and 30% of Americans are going to participate in sexual abuse, either as receiving or giving. You're going to deal with 1 in 7 has a substance addiction. You're going to deal with more than 60%, and if we really look into it, more than 85% of Americans have deep unresolved traumas that they're coping with unconsciously without the technology to do so in a way that is creating and sustaining chronic pain. You're going to deal with a regular message that money is more important than human beings. You're going to be in a field in which the odds of having a single true friend that really understands and listens to you are low. So this is a probability field that comes with living in the United States. Now that, of course, gets more selective as you're in, a nice, if you're in Austin or Portland or something, those odds are, of course, much lower than the national odds in different categories. And then there are different groups within the community, and those odds are different there. But the system stays the same as you choose to change your relationship with it. The person who asks for money and never pays back their loan still makes the rounds. You're just not the one paying it. Someone else is paying that person so as not to be tantrumed at. And it's that kind of situation, which is why the next thing is more fundamental, which is to actually participate simultaneously in changing a relationship with what is and changing the environment, which is the design that is leading to that statistic. And this is very important to understand, that there is a system design that is leading to that statistic. And it's a synergy. It's a synergy of teaching children not to think. It's a synergy of leaving out emotional literacy. It's a synergy of punishing people for talking about the pink elephants in the room, but not doing anything about the pink elephants that are in the room. When the only change that happens when someone says, why is it that you say you're environmentalists, but we're meeting to discuss the environment in a $200 million mansion and we're all flying in with private jets? Why are we discussing the environment here as opposed to maybe out in an area where trees need planting? When the only response to a question like that in the big pink elephant in that room is to not invite that person to the next $200 million party to talk about the environment, then you don't get change. The system stays the same. The change agents are disinvited to maintain the status quo. That's always the first defense to maintain inertia, is to punish anyone who wants to change the system. But changing the environment and having a treatment of what the environment would have to be, this is the diagnosis and the medicine. Creating medicine that says this is the environment that's creating the statistics as they are. This is what creates things as they are. This is the way of thinking. This is the lens through which we look. This is the conclusions we reach. And this is the statistical data field that this thought pattern creates. So there you have it. Okay. Well, if you diagnose what's off about that, And it's useful to be aware that if chronic pain is being created unnecessarily, there is always something off with the design. Chronic unnecessary pain is not innate. So if it's there, there is something off in the design. So you can change the environment. And this is something that, for example, when I think when I was 38, and I noticed that I was more bitter and more brittle than I was when I was 33. Well, that means that I'm in an environment that is inducing more pain. That's part of brittleness and impatience correlate with pain. The more pain you are in, the more impatient you will be. Meaning if you're standing there in agony and someone is making you repeat yourself and you can't get to pain relief, be it a drink or a drug or a lay down or a swimming pool or sex or whatever it is you're going to try and medicate your pain. If you're in pain and someone's like, well, what does that mean? Say that again. You're going to be very impatient. You're going to be very brittle. Fuck you, out of my way, I'm in pain. If you're in joy and ecstasy, you've got endless patience. Oh, I will tell you for the third time. How interesting. You're someone who is determined not to hear this. Amazing. Why is that? There's no impatience and brittleness. So brittleness and impatience correlate with pain. And so I know that. And so when I knew that I was more brittle, more cynical, more impatient at 38 than I was at 33, this was an alarming trend, because it means that by 48, that will continue. Meaning trends continue until a force equal or greater interrupts them. That's just natural physics. Momentum continues until a force equal or greater, or it could be inertia, but it doesn't just pop out of thin air. If you've got something that's receiving no energy and it's moving at X speed, it's moving along, and inertia may slow it down at, let's say, 5% a month. And so then after 20 months, it would stop, and then you'd be wherever you were at that point, and then nothing's going to move it back towards joy and beauty unless you enact some large forces that push it back in that direction. And so I first of all recognized my father's cynicism and bitterness. And I asked myself, because I'm looking here at changing the environment, I asked myself, what did my father not do at my age that if I did would end up in a different place than my father? Meaning, what could my father have done at age 38 that he didn't do? And I determined, relative to bitterness and cynicism, that he had not made a list of all his dreams and gone for them. And so I said, okay, that's a medicine. Let me make a list of all my dreams. So I made and I had achieved thousands of goals by that point. And so things weren't coming up. It's like I built a house, I had my business, I had, tons of crystals. I mean, I'm not a big materialist, so there wasn't all that much there. So instead I turned it into a bucket list. So I made a list of 28 items on my bucket list. And then I allocated $30,000 in 12 months. And I said, I am going to do this bucket list. And I did. And lo and behold, bitterness and cynicism lifted. Because how can you be bitter and cynical when you're going to 3 of your favorite Cirque du Soleil shows in Vegas, driven by a lovely woman who picks you up at the airport, and then following that, fly off to the Philippines for 2 weeks of luxury vacations, scuba diving, having a private teacher, diving through a waterfall, then finding how fun sailboating is, buying a little 2-person sailboat to go out in the San Francisco Bay, going off to Maui to kite surf and doing that, writing 2 books that I wanted to write that hadn't gotten written, one on my profession, another just that irked me that it didn't exist, and filling my house with houseplants and buying myself bouquets of flowers. And like, how can you be bitter and cynical in that kind of an intensity? And so that bought me 2 years, which meaning for 2 years, the investment in doing everything that I wanted to do before I died, just it takes a while for hedonic adaptation to pick up. I was stumped because I didn't know what the core disease was at a deep level, because of our shadow adverse culture and the positivity drive in the New Age. I didn't understand, the pain that needed treatment. So this was Band-Aid stuff. It's houseplants are not going to take away the grief that's stored in the body at age 5. But there's something to live for. It's better than waking up in pain around stored body pain at age 5 and looking around and saying, I hate this house. Why am I even here if I'm in this amount of pain? It gives some boost to the idea of I've got a great present to come back to once I can heal this pain. So that's a systemic level. And a very big part of that level has been spending 6 months a year in Thailand. Because in Thailand, it is 1,000% easier to smile, to spend quality time with a stranger, to do art, to do spontaneous activities, to laugh, to be in presence with warm-hearted people. It is 1,000% easier to be in an environment that is conducive to my feminine self, which is the part that is in most pain. My femininity has been damaged in this culture, in this cult, 80% more than my masculinity. And so to go into a culture that is 1,000% more graceful towards that energy is medicinal. It's not fighting with, why can't you give me a genuine smile? And why do you keep asking how I'm doing when you don't want to know? And why do you keep pretending that you're too busy to have a meaningful conversation when you're sitting and watching TV for 4 fucking hours a day? Why do you keep why are you like this? Why are you like this? Why are you like this? This is crazy. I hate it. Rather than fighting, with one case history after another in a statistic that says, 80% of the people I run into are going to have these statistics. I'm changing the statistical set. I'm going to a cult that's 4,000 years old rather than 400 years old. So it's more feminine. The older cults are more feminine because all the deep well-being is in the feminine side. The alchemy is released when the masculine serves the feminine. Now, this is not men serving women. When the woman provides the beautiful environment, for example, for the man, she is serving the feminine in the man. When the man brings her flowers, he's serving the feminine in the woman. When the man caresses and arouses her body, he's invoking the feminine in the woman. When the woman seduces the man, she's attending to the feminine in the man. All the magic emerges as the masculine energy attends, contains, honors, responds to the feminine energy. And it is the feminine energy that feels the joy, the innocence, the beauty, that are the musical notes that emerge in the psyche around honor, around beauty, around truth, around goodness. Now, what you're looking to do in changes in the environment and changes in your choices is to change the probability field. You are not in control over whether or not some crazy neighborhood drives into your garage today and smashes his truck. You are not in control over whether a suicide bomber blows up a building in your city this week. You're not in control of what is put on the news. So what you're looking to do is shift the probability field, first for yourself and then in a wider range of people. So, for example, if you live in upper state Maine, surrounded by forest in a log cabin, what are the odds that a terrorist is going to blow up the neighboring maple trees? It's not much. If you live in New York City, what are the odds that there's going to be a major crime in a nearby building? They're much higher. So you look at the probability fields that you're trying to shift. So, for example, if I want to spend more quality time with people spontaneously in a feminine way, all I have to do is stop my business, hop on an 18-hour flight, and suddenly I'm in a probability field in which in 1 month I will have more quality time with lovely people than in an entire year in the United States, maybe 2 years. So the entire, so I'm looking at 1,000 to 2,000% instant shift in the probability field. Now, similarly, and this is the greatest gift I've given myself in years, marrying my wife as a sensitive, as an innocent, as someone who loves and lives in feminine domain, and buying her a dog that became our dog, this increases my experience of beautiful feminine energy by hundreds and hundreds of percent every day, wherever we are. And so the probability field that I will experience playful laughter being married to my wife versus not being married to my wife is about 700% more. Meaning there's a 700% higher chance that I will laugh playfully today as a result of being married to my wife than not. And there's more than a 1,500% probability that I will play around and be more engaged in my body because of my dog. And there's a 700% chance that I'll be more sane as a result of going and managing my crew today. So there's things that we can do that shift the probability field, not the certainty. There's days when I fight with my wife, and so there's not much of that. But statistically speaking, this is a probability field. And we want to also improve the distinctions. We want to get rid of black and white protocols if we're going to improve pain. It's no good saying that I can't trust people. People are bad, people are selfish, or people are loving and great, the universe is wonderful. It's no good using these grandiose blanket statements. Before you can heal an imbalance in pain, and before you can develop a medicinal strategy that does that, you've got to actually have distinctions. This person will always do what they say they will do, and they're generally a grouch. This person will never lie to me, but they're not very kind. This person is very kind, but they think that being kind is to lie, and they're completely unreliable. This person is a good person. They're just confused about what good is. They don't know that this is actually harming me, but they do the best they can. Now, each of these people you have to treat differently, which is why these absolutes are not very helpful. And you also have to relate to yourself in that way. It's like, I cannot stand lying. I won't lie, and I will not put up with lying. Okay, well then, even though this person thinks they're being kind and they're always lying, my choice is to dissociate with them and to tell them why, perhaps, at which point they might protest endlessly. And so there's different, there's different strategies for responding. But this distinction as treatment ties in with, step 4, which is assess the individual ability and probability field. You want to know the probability field of the person that you're dealing with. This person is going to pout 4 times a month. This person is going to steal something about once a year. This person is going to have a fit and then blame everyone else that they've had a fit, and then disappear and wait to be coaxed back out of their sullen silence every 3 months. This person is going to have a great new business idea they never do anything about after this thing. This person is going to talk about lots of things, etc., and then at certain key moments feel overwhelmed and not actually do them and go on to some other thing to talk about. And so, you look at the pattern in the context of probability field. And most things are cyclical. And you can tell a lot by someone in the first 3 days. They'll usually do a tremendous amount of how they're going to be in a relationship in 3 days. In the first 3 days, that's one of the guidelines I use with a romantic partner, is pretty much expect someone to do what they do in the first 3 days at a larger scale throughout the relationship. So I had one partner who, she said she was looking for a really meaningful connection and quality time. That's why I wrote to her online. She didn't respond to my email for 36 hours. I said, let's disengage. The main connection point was you supposedly said you're looking for someone who's really available. That's what I'm looking for. But if you can't even answer an email in 36 hours, how the odds of you having time for a 4-hour-a-day to 20-hour-a-day relationship are quite low, particularly if that's what you say is a priority and you haven't prioritized this, so let's just say goodbye. Well, she was instantly interested because I rejected her. She had just been sitting around unprioritizing things. It's not like she was terribly busy, but so as soon as I didn't want anything to do with her, that was the sign that I was the one. And so, she responded, within minutes to that email. Hello, let's connect. No interest. Okay, let's not connect. Instant response. So that told me who she was at a certain level throughout the relationship, to the point that when I broke up with her, she, rather than accepting the breakup, she offered me $2 million and several other bribes if I would marry her and stay married no matter what for, I think it was 2 years. So $1 million a year too. But, that was because I was breaking up with her. And so, that was within the first email exchange, she had told me who she was in that domain. But again, people are not black and white. People are not good and bad. People have these patterns that benefit this and harm that, and it's a matter of respecting, seeing, and seeing again, who is someone? And can you create more well-being with them and with yourself than not engaging at all, given who they are? Knowing that no one is perfect, including ourselves. So you assess the individual ability and the individual probability field so that you can decide whether your choice is to have nothing to do with them because you don't have the skill to extract the value, or, many of us walk around with thorns, repressed traumas that haven't been dealt with. And so even if someone is 80% good, if they regularly press that thorn, it's so horrific that we can't have anything to do with them because the pain just outweighs all of the problems, all the benefits, which is a big reason many relationships break up. So we need to create a plan based on, so we have a sense of where our pain is. We have a sense of the environment that produces the pain. We have a sense of what we could change that would reduce our pain in relationship to the environment. And we have a sense of what needs to change in the environment in order for our pain to go down. We then have a diagnosis or a treatment of implementing the choices that restore balance. And we have a treatment of making changes in the environment that are within our influence. For example, I couldn't just fly to Thailand without a passport or without money for a plane ticket or without owning a business that I can shut down. So when you make choices, as I've done since an early age, to free up time and personal flexibility, those choices make changing my relationship with the environment more possible, which is a goal. And changes my probability field. So the thing I want to run through briefly are some of the responses that may make sense to different people as pain management responses. So let's say that you're with someone where every time you talk about your pain, they tell you why you shouldn't have any pain. And you end up feeling lonely, frustrated, and unheard because, according to the person you're trying to talk to, your pain shouldn't exist, which means that if you talk about it, you're bad. Which means that the real problem is not that you're in pain and need some support. The real problem is that you shouldn't be feeling it in the first place. Well, if you cannot change and negotiate a healthier response to pain, meaning if the smoke detector goes off in the house and you're with a crazy person who tells the smoke detector that it shouldn't be going off because there shouldn't be any fire, but there is a fire that is producing smoke and the smoke detector is going off, and rather than putting out the fire, the person gives the smoke detector a lecture on how to be quieter. Well, if you're dealing with a crazy person, silence, which is one of their goals, that's what they're trying to do, shut you up, because they don't know how to respond. That's the basis of trying to shut pain messages up, is that you don't know how to deal with them. If you know how to deal with them, you want them, meaning a good CEO of a company has an open door policy with every employee and says, if anyone has any reason I need to know about something, tell me immediately. I want to know what's wrong so that I can fix it. Now, an incompetent CEO says, I don't know what I'm doing, so nobody gives me any problems, so I'm going to go off and play golf, etc., and just ignore stuff because I don't know how to deal with it. So being silent and dissociating with such people is an intelligent response. If you're going to be punished for delivering accurate information, dissociate or be silent. If you are in a situation where you are in pain, but you cannot imagine a single thing that can be done about it, and no one can imagine, meaning the first thing to alert when there's pain is to let everyone know. This is not ideal. However, it's not no. It's not ideal. However, if no one has any solution, one, and two, everyone else is in pain as well, then you've got distraction, painkillers, minimization as a good strategy. You're on a hike. 3 people have all broken their ankles. There's no one to carry them. There's no splint. There's no cell phone reception. Nobody's there. Saying, I'll manage, or taking a painkiller and trying to get down the slope, or sending someone down and saying, oh, it's no big deal, even though you're missing an appointment, is a good strategy. Making the best of it is a good pain response strategy if nothing can be done. It is a terrible strategy if there's plenty that could be done. Just like silence is a terrible strategy if you're with someone that would help you. If someone says, hey, how can I help? And you say, nothing. You've just sustained chronic pain by refusing to participate. So the same with minimization. Minimization, numbing, distraction, avoidance, let's sing a song together and we'll hobble into town, 6 hours later or whatever with a broken ankle, is an intelligent strategy if nothing can be done. Communication is, of course, a great strategy if someone could help that wants to help. And if you don't know, you've got to test people out. You may have to ask 10 people. One tells you shouldn't be feeling that way. The other person says, what do you expect, and blames you. The other person says, I would love to help, but I'm really busy. Another person says, they've got problems of their own. And you have to communicate. And of course, in a trauma-based culture, the responsiveness to pain is much lower because everyone's self-absorbed. Action is the response if there is anything in your influence that would reduce the pain. Action is a good response. I'm in pain. I feel like shit. Would a massage help? I think it would. Okay. Do you have money for a massage? Do you have a car to get to the masseuse? I think I do. Okay, go. Take action to minimize the pain. Prioritization is, a helpful response, meaning make a list of all the different things that could be done, and then prioritize those things that are intelligent. Intelligence is the efficiency with which time, money, and natural resources are transformed into human well-being. And one of the most intelligent things you can possibly do if you're in pain is lift the pain. It depends, of course, in context. If you're running and you've got this big something up around running and you're running a marathon, then the most intelligent thing is to actually lean into the pain a little bit more each day. Watch the Eddie Izzard world tour of comedy and marathons and all that, and you can learn a lot from that dynamic, and also the interface with the culture. Eddie is transvestite, a comedian, and one of his pains is of being viewed as too effeminate, and so having the world marathon type part of his persona developed gets respect within the culture in a way that so there's some part of the culture that respects his transvestite humor, and there's another part of the culture that respects his work for charity, and there's another part of the culture that respects the fact that he runs these insane marathons. So given that one of the things that he's medicating is the wound of a mother who left and then going to boarding school and not feeling loved and not feeling seen and not feeling noticed and not being connected, and knowing that what he's doing is trying to please a large segment of the British and world population, so that he will be approved of and appreciated, and that's something he craves and hungers for. And this is a very good strategy for doing it, because, as I say, you get the crusty types that appreciate him for running 26 marathons day after day. You get the Christians who love him for doing Christian good and raising money for charity. You get the teens who love him for being his own person and dressing the way he likes to dress. And you got the general culture that wants to manage their own pain with humor, loving him for being a comedian. It doesn't get any better, except, of course, sadly, he understands more than most that even all of that is not enough to help a 5-year-old boy who's lost his mother and then been sent off to boarding school understand or answer the pain of dissociation, of separation, etc. And so part of the thing you also have to, look at is, Eddie might get better leverage by, working with that inner 5-year-old and crying and really loving that 5-year-old, rather than, pushing to try and answer something that no matter how many marathons he runs, that 5-year-old may still feel abandoned, and so that's, but he's doing, in terms of seeking approval, strategically and in healthy ways. I mean, he's got it pretty much covered, going around the, anyway. So you've got action, you've got prioritization of the things that produce the most well-being and healing for the least amount of energy. So, for example, if your pain is because you're not eating enough salt, you could, of course, go out and eat a lot of French fries, or you could travel around the world and eat more spicy food in some other country, or you could just take a tablespoon of salt more every day, and suddenly the pain disappears. So one is more energy efficient. So you want to prioritize those pain responses once you've identified the pain and identified the optimal treatment in both choices and changes in the environment. Changes in the environment need structural things. They need partnering with the people in your environment. So you can't just change a marriage. I need to go to my wife and say, I don't like this. I don't like the fact that this happened a week ago. Then it happened 2 days later. Now it's happening every day. And it looks like this is just going to go on endlessly. I don't like it. I'm not up for this. So, why is it going on? Tell me what's going on your side. What do we need to do to change this? Because I don't want to be having this happen in my environment. I want you in my environment. You're doing this. And it's hurting me this way and this way and this way for this reason. What are we going to do? And saying, I don't know, isn't okay. Well, figure it out. Go write it down. Come up with your list, and we'll go over it. And so that's a response to prioritization. You focus on what's going to have the most benefit for the least pain, for least cost. Manipulation. The human species is intelligent at some level. The more sociopathic the environment, the more effective manipulation or domination is. Because when you have a sociopathic environment, everyone is focused on short-term pain management as they've defined that themselves. And pretty much anyone else trying to engage with them is perceived as an enemy because it affects their short-term pain management. Maybe they're trying to keep busy and you're asking them to think. Well, then they're in more pain because they're trying to avoid that. And so Manipulation is the strategy when you cannot withdraw and you are in a sociopathic environment where empathy doesn't work. Because when you're in a healthy environment and you say to someone, look, I've got 2-year-old kids, there's no way I can put a gate in here because I'm renting. From time to time, the kid runs out, and you're driving twice the speed limit here, and I'd really like you to slow down, and as a reminder, I'm going to put this sign here. Well, if they don't care, and they just keep racing by at twice the speed limit, and your anxiety is through the roof, well, the police are manipulation. It's like, I will call the police. Here are the police. You can get speeding tickets and now. So when you've got a sociopathic protocol in the other person, you transfer some of your pain over to their pain. Then they respond to their pain. They don't respond to your pain because they're not empathic. When you've got a sociopathic state in an individual, they do not respond to empathy. They respond to their own pain. So you don't get to change their behavior unless you increase their pain for doing the behavior that increases your pain. And this is the principle of escalated conflict and war, etc. Is if you've got an empathic government, they don't invade another country. It's not very nice. So the way that peace, quote unquote, is created or maintained to some extent, think, the buildup of the Russia and Soviet, Russia and US, is I could give a shit about you and I'm going to invade you if I have the chance. Well, I could give a shit about you and I will invade you if I get a chance. Well, let's start building up the arms race. Well, when it's clear, when you're amongst sociopaths, they are not any weakness, any need is viewed as something to exploit and dominate, and so they don't respond, they exploit. If you've got a sociopathic gang, and there's a scared young woman who's lost at night, they don't say, oh, how can we help? They say, this is great. You're scared and you're lost. That means we can gang rape you, torment you for a few hours. No one's going to come for help. And we can feel our hit of power and whatever it is we're trying to medicate. Usually bullies are trying to medicate feelings of incredible helplessness by making someone else feel incredibly helpless so that they don't feel alone in their own helplessness. And that's why they joined a gang. And the gang has to do its job. And the job is to make usually young boys or young women who feel incredibly isolated and helpless and meaningless in a cult that treats them like garbage, helps them feel important and powerful, so by transferring the wound. And so that's what you do. So if you want to get out of that situation, you don't appeal to the kindness of the gang leader. You get out a gun. You say, oh yeah, you can rape me probably, and you probably I probably won't be able to kill all of you, but I'll start with your gang leader. In fact, maybe I'll just bite him off right now. And then anyone else? You say, it's like, is it really worth feeling powerful with this person who's already killed one of our... it's like, and then they leave you alone. And so with people in a sociopathic state, which are people who are very terrified of something, with people who are in trauma, etc., but they're hurting you as their coping mechanism, you manipulate and intimidate, and you transfer some of the pain they're causing to you onto them. And that's the framework for successfully pivoting out of the dynamic. They're not necessarily out to hurt you. They're just so self-absorbed that unless their own pain is linked to the interaction, they're not going to respond. And so, for example, I have a Unity minister at Unity in Marin who, I looked him up online. He seems more of a schmoozer and, than really trying to help people. So, not surprisingly, when I asked him if I could give a presentation about homelessness in Marin and what people could do, well, he ignored the email. Then I said, well, should I contact some other people in the board, etc., about this? Well, then he apologized and said he'd get back shortly. But then it's now a week later, and so it's pretty clear homelessness is very low on his priority list. And I'm not asking him for any money, and I'm asking for a few minutes of his time to prepare a presentation, and that's it. And so people out in the street homeless with PTSD, not very important to me. Doing this and this to look good, etc. in the ministry, very important. So this gets deprioritized. Well, I know, of course, I can escalate through manipulation by pointing out that the email exchange would be in a documentary, which it is. I'm doing a whole section on the entire power system's unresponsiveness to homelessness. This group won't respond to emails. This group won't respond to emails. This group takes weeks to respond to emails about homelessness, but takes about 2 hours to respond to emails that give them money. So homeless people, 2 weeks priority, money 2 hours priority. So you can say that them getting cash is about 3,000% more important to them than them participating without spending anything on homelessness. And so you can understand where people's priorities are in this range, and you can escalate those priorities if you think they are hurting everyone. Meaning it does actually cost the system an enormous amount to sustain chronic homelessness. So it's costing everyone. We're just illiterate about that. We don't understand the costs in a variety of ways. So you have voting is another response to say, look, you're interested in looking normal and good, etc. Let's educate the voters and vote. And then all the people that are just doing whatever the majority is doing, however painful, it's like, everyone's doing it, and that's their only filter. Everyone's doing it. So you've got to look at winning a vote or creating a vote in that situation. If it's someone who's empathic, you want to create invitation and increase awareness. If someone is empathic and you say, I'm in extraordinary pain, they respond. If someone is sociopathic and you say you're in extraordinary pain, they don't respond. So with someone who's empathic, increased awareness is key. With someone who is responsive, invitation is key, guidance. Just tell me what to do. I want to help. With that person, you say, do this, 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 and this. After this plan is implemented, you then assess. And there's a couple more things I want to just talk about in general categories. So one is numbing. When do you numb pain? You numb pain when, one, you cannot end it in the short term, and two, the pain has immobilized you, and three, you know how to end it, but you're immobilized. And so you want to numb pain to give you time to act in a way that ends the pain. That's a good use of numbing. A bad use of pain is I don't want to think, I don't want to figure out what the pain is, I don't want to feel the pain, I'm not going to do anything, but I'm going to just take increasing numbers of painkillers and addictions in one form or another so that I can continue the painful protocol that's creating the pain without doing anything about it. This will result in escalating pain and addiction with no pain relief. when to transfer the pain. I'm in pain. The pain is being caused by this environment. The pain will continue to be caused by this environment, i.e., I am a tropical lizard that has been flown into Alaska, and I'm going to die in the snow here. I need help. Nobody is responding. I'm dying. Well, in that sense, you transfer the pain to others, meaning if you squeak and people are too dumb to understand that a tropical lizard is going to die in the snow, well, then you start flailing them around. But you have to provide the pain in such a way that they have some intelligence to understand what they have to do to reduce your pain. And so that's pivotal. I mean, a lizard just squeaking and biting people might get shot, which might put it out of its misery if it's just dying in the freezing cold, and so it still might be beneficial. So you transfer pain when you're in a sociopathic environment that could easily respond but is choosing not to, and they're causing chronic pain in a way that is not healthy. Then the pain is shared and they respond to their own pain rather than to your pain. And finally, you act on pain when action can be taken that reduces the pain and moves things towards balance. You don't want to reduce pain that doesn't move things towards balance. Meaning if the reason you're in pain is you're eating too much salt, you don't just want to take a painkiller and keep eating the salt. You want to stop eating so much salt or eat more salt or whatever the imbalance is. If you're fat and you don't feel like exercising anymore, you don't just say, oh gosh, it's so painful to exercise. I'm just too fat, so I'm going to just stop exercising. No, you're moving into more and more imbalance. Now it's more comfortable to eat more, and you're burning less of the weight. And so in that situation, you push into the pain created by the imbalance of not exercising and eating too much. And if you say, I'm going to exercise this amount because this is a good amount for this body at this maturity and all that, and if I feel terrible about it, I'll just eat less so that I don't feel so terrible, and it'll get better with time, moving towards balance, as opposed to, gee, at this rate, it's going to be even worse to walk next week, and I'm definitely going to keep eating, and so let me just put on, who can expect me to walk when I weigh 700 pounds? Just so much weight to carry. So that's when you push into the pain as opposed to anesthetize. And you have to have a model of where the imbalance is and how to right it. And then you have to assess, is it working? You have to have, we should see, like with salt, you should see some change within 36 hours or less. It's not like you just start taking tablespoons of salt and see what happens in a year. You want to be able to assess the theory by having a sense of the time frame of the impact of your dealing. If it's an insulin shot, you should feel a change within minutes. Otherwise, it's not the right medicine. With an adrenaline shot, again, you should see change in seconds, not years. So you need to know the time frame of your medicine to understand if it's working or not. And you need to you also have to have a certain amount of sense of what the other person is dealing with, which may need to explode to find out, because if they're an addict and in a sociopathic state, and you increase pain in their direction and they don't know how to deal with it, they could just attack you rather than stop causing the harmful behavior. So it's difficult to see. But these are intelligent responses to pain. And then a few guiding principles that I think are great are truth. There is an abundance of energy. There's no shortage of energy in the multiverse. Tons of it everywhere. A single atom has more energy than we could possibly know what to do with, most of us. Synergy equals wealth. So you want to move towards complex systems that involve partnering with people over time. Of course, you can't partner with addicts, so you've got to fight the addiction first so that you can partner with the human being. Complexity equals beauty. As we move towards the sphere, we have more and more symmetry, more and more grace, but also more and more complexity as we move in that direction to more and more distinctions. And consciousness is key, meaning the level of consciousness determines the sense of complexity, to where we're very, very dull and asleep, etc., to where we're incredibly open. The level of consciousness is key. And look to intelligence, look to balance, look to intelligence, meaning always consider the most intelligent path to create well-being. Look to balance, if something's way out of whack in some area, look to balance. And look towards the perspective that says that we're all part of one system, and that the synergy that is released when each part of the system is honored and invited to play the part in which it is most capable is the synergy in the system that creates the most value and the most beauty. So this is a map for dealing with pain. And it's been fun to explore this with you.